Test. Thank you, Carl Johansson, good friend of Larry's. We've come here today to remember Larry Goldsmith and to join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to his family and his friends. Mourning is a time that's filled with many emotions and memories, some bitter, some sweet. And we're going to begin our service with the recitation of various readings and prayers and psalms, thus linking Larry's life with the millennial-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. And we're all here because we have lost a tremendous friend to our community, Larry, who, as many of us have considered our closest friend. I think everybody who knows Larry considered him one of their closest friends. But really a part of our Utah Jewish family. And so we're all in mourning, but some of us are in, of course, deeper mourning because we were even closer to Larry. And the black career ribbon that we tear shows us who those people are. And likewise, we tear this ribbon because it shows that our hearts are torn. And for the last almost 95 years, almost a century, we've had Larry as part of our world in our lives. Maybe there's nobody here who has lived a single day in this world without Larry Goldsmith being a part of that world. And now instead of talking to Larry, we're going to be talking about him. And having to make that transition is painful. And that's why our hearts are torn. So if you are wearing one of the black career ribbons, I'd like to invite you to rise. Adonai natan v'Adonai lekach yishma Adonai mevarach. God gives and God takes away. Blessed forever is the name of God. And for our hearts are torn, we've performed this act of Kriya. I've been telling folks, and hear me say this probably a couple times, that it takes an extraordinarily rare individual who can live to be just a couple weeks shy of his 95th birthday. And yet when he dies, we all feel this pain of, it's too soon. Why was he taken from us so early? We thought he had a few more years left. That's how I've heard many people say about Larry, where we've had a person who's almost 95 years old. His passing seemed too soon for many of us because he was completely with it and so much a part of this community until even his last days. And so hearing the violin, it made me think of this poem from Chaim Nachman Bialik, the national poet of the Hebrew language of Israel. Say this when you mourn for me, there was a man, and look, he is no more. He died before his time. The music of his life suddenly stopped. A pity, there was another song in him, now it is lost forever. A great pity, he had a violin, a living, speaking soul, to which he uttered the secrets of his heart, making all its strings vibrate, save one he kept inviolate. Back and forth his supple fingers danced, one string alone remained entranced, still unheard. A pity, all its life that string quivered, silently shook, yearned for its song, its mate, as a heart saddens before its fate. Despite delay, it waited daily, mutely, beseeching its savior lover, who lingered, loitered, tarry ever, and did not come. Great is the pain. There was a man, and look, he is no more. The music of his life suddenly stopped. There was another song in him that has now been lost forever. We learn that mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and their warmth will always be with us, bring comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. We read from the book of Ecclesiastes that there is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for tearing and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. And traditionally, we read at funerals as well the words of Psalm 23, which talk about the valley of the shadow of death. But this is a psalm not for the dead, but actually for us who are still here. It's a reminder to us that as we go through life, having experienced this loss, that God is there with us to comfort us. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You've anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. One final reading I'll do before we hear some reflections and memories of Larry is that we just entered the book of Shemot in the Torah, book of Exodus, we call it in English. But Shemot literally means names. And this past week's Torah portion was Shemot, the portion of names. And our rabbis taught that there are three crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But they actually said there's a fourth crown too. They emphasized that the crown of a good name excels them all. The book of Ecclesiastes says a good name is to be treasured above precious oil. Toshem mishemen tov. Wealth, health, even life passes by. But a good name lives forever. It is this view that the Talmud teaches. Monuments need not be erected for the righteous. Their deeds are their memorials. They will be remembered and revered for the kindness they have shown, for the love they have given. They are shining examples of what it means to be a mensch. And to hear some of those memories and good deeds, things that Larry did to inscribe his name into the book of Menschlichkeit, I'd like to invite up Larry's son, Douglas, to share with us some memories of his father.
On behalf of our family, I want to thank each of you for being here today to honor our father. Your presence means more to us than we can possibly express. Being surrounded by people who cared so much for him reminds us of just how deeply he was woven into so many lives. Since his passing, we have been profoundly touched by the outpouring of care and kindness and love. So many people, friends, colleagues, and family, have used the same words to describe him: warm, kind, loving, deeply caring. His bright smile was unmistakable, and again we've heard how he made people feel truly seen and accepted. He had a rare and quiet gift for putting others at ease. More than anything, our father genuinely engaged with people. He met others with curiosity and kindness, always hoping to make their day a little brighter. He loved staying in touch, calling to check in, making sure all was well. Birthdays were never forgotten. He understood how much it mattered to let someone know they were being thought of. Dad was never someone to talk about himself. Even when he wasn't feeling well, the question of "how are you doing" was met with "I'm okay, but how are you?" He never wanted to burden anyone with his worries. His interest in others was sincere, and his care was real. One of our father's proudest accomplishments was being named valedictorian of Lowell High School in San Francisco. In that speech, he quoted Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, words that we were often reminded of during family dinners. Look not mournfully into the past, it comes not back again. Wisely improve the present, it is thine. Go forth to meet the shadowy future without fear and with a manly heart. Those words were not just something he admired, they were something he lived. Our father did not dwell in the past. He learned how to forgive, how to let go of pain, and how to keep moving forward grounded in the present. He was also shaped by words spoken to him by his rabbi at his confirmation at Temple Emmanuel in San Francisco. Lawrence, do what you can to make the world a better place than when you found it. That teaching became a guiding light for his life. My father was often asked to serve in leadership roles because of his reputation as a peacemaker. He was by nature conflict avoidant. But rather than retreating, that discomfort pushed him to listen carefully, to collaborate, to find common ground. His deep commitment to community was shown through his tireless service on countless boards, including Guadalupe School, United Way of Salt Lake Community Service Council, and Congregation Kol Amin. He served as president of many organizations. Among them were the Jewish Community Center, Temple B'nai Israel, Jewish Welfare Fund, United Jewish Federation of Utah, the Downtown Retail Merchants Association, Mental Health Association, Alliance House, the National Council of Christians and Jews, and the Inclusion Center. What he treasured most were the relationships he formed along the way. Along with his dear friend Marty Gelman, he helped to create interfaith Thanksgiving services, bringing people of different faiths together year after year. Many of you know that Marty and my father passed away within an hour of each other on January 1st. Two devoted leaders whose work will continue to shape Jewish life in Utah for generations. Dad grew up as an only child in a multi-generational home. Becoming a father brought him great pride. And like many fathers of his generation, he worked long hours at the family clothing store Arthur Frank. He saw his primary role as provider, guiding us more than playing with us. But we will always hold dear memories that mattered most. Family vacations filled with horseback riding, swimming, and completely out of character for our father, a few rafting trips in Jackson Hole. He held us to high academic standards and taught us responsibility, independence, and respect. When faced with difficult choices like missing school for the High Holy Days, he would simply respond, "I know you'll make the right decision." The right decision was to honor our father's wishes. And in hindsight, that lesson, learning to tolerate discomfort in service of our values, was one of the greatest gifts that he gave to us. For more than 60 years, our parents built a life centered on family, close relationships, and service to others. Throughout their more than 60-year marriage, our parents were devoted to family, to their close circle of friends, and to improving life in our community. Sunday night dinners were sacred. Those weekly gatherings brought us together to share a meal lovingly prepared by our mother and helped us to stay connected. It was around that table that we learned the importance of family and for caring for others. Every summer, our parents celebrated their anniversary in Sun Valley with all of us, a tradition that lasted more than 30 years. At each anniversary dinner, Dad would raise a glass and remind us that of all the places they traveled, Sun Valley with their children and grandchildren was indeed their favorite. The grandchildren especially cherished one-on-one breakfasts or lunches with Grandpa, where he encouraged them to indulge in their favorite foods. After our mother passed away, Dad continued volunteering with determination. We rallied around him, and Sunday night dinners moved to local restaurants. He loved those evenings. He told us stories about growing up in San Francisco and his time in the Army. Our father famously disliked exercise of any kind. He often joked about his Army days, recalling that when asked which department he wanted to serve in, he chose transportation because, as he put it, that sounds like a lot of sitting. This coming Tuesday, our father would have turned 95. If asked the secret to his longevity, he would tell you, never exercise, drink whatever you want, live on muffins, bagels, and treats of any kind, and lots of candy. In his honor, we'll be serving his favorite muffin at the reception. Just over 2 weeks ago, our father fell at home and was admitted to the hospital. The days that followed were an emotional whirlwind. As my siblings and I talked, we talked of rehab, then hospice, then true to form, signs of improvement led back to talking of rehab. By the second evening, we found him joking with the nurses, though the familiar twinkle in his eye was masking his pain. When I visited him on Monday evening, I expected to find him as I had left him, ready to talk about recovery. But his smile had faded, and he took my hand, and he said, "I've had a good life for 94 years. I know this will be hard on you kids. I don't want you to be sad. I love all of you. I'm so proud of all of you and all that you've become. But it's time for me to say goodbye." His clarity was unmistakable. It was clear that he was ready. In that quiet moment, my father and I spoke honestly about his life. When he expressed doubts, I was able to reassure him that he had fulfilled his rabbi's charge, that he had truly made the world a better place. I told him how deeply he was loved and how grateful we all were for all that he had done for us. He whispered his thanks. He closed his eyes and he rested. I was always treasured those final moments with him. The next day, we were able to bring him home. We're forever grateful that Rabbi Spector was able to be with him and offer the Vidui final prayer before death. We gathered around him, caring for him as he had always taught us, to act out of love. He passed peacefully, surrounded by family in his own home. Our father was a gentle soul. He will always be remembered for his kindness, his humility, and his desire to support others in their quest to live an authentic life. Through his life, he was committed to fulfilling the teaching given to him as a child, to leave the world a better place than he found it. May his memory be for a blessing. And today, as we move from remembrance to Kiddush, may we honor him by carrying his compassion, his integrity, and love forward, continuing the sacred work of making the world a better place.
Thank you, Doug. I'd like to invite up Larry's good friend, Kilo Zamora, from the Inclusion Center to share some words.
I know this is a great rabbi because he knew I would need these right off the bat. Hi, everyone. My name is Kilo. And I had to reach out to two close friends to write this. So thank you, David Litvak and Jay Jacobson, for your guiding words on what to do today. David said, "What would Joan Smith say? Just talk from the heart." And Jay Jacobson said, "It's my job to paint a portrait of Larry for you from my perspective." So let me see if I can do some of that. You know, Larry has introduced me to every rabbi, beginning with Rabbi Wenger and Rabbi Zippel, all through the years. And I thought the threads that bound us together had maybe frayed a little bit because I'd never met our new rabbi. We would go to Lamb's Grill. Probably a lot of you remember Lamb's Grill. And we would have breakfast with the new rabbi, and we would talk about how to make sure this community was a safe and inclusive and warm space for them to land, and what could we offer them in terms of being community leaders. And it was quite an honor for me. But in postmortem, here Larry is introducing me to the Rabbi Spector. So Larry, thanks again for keeping the tradition going. I first met Larry at Edna Shetler's house. I had just come home. I was 19, and I had just come home from a camp ran by the National Conference of Christians and Jews, now called the Inclusion Center, called Camp Anytown. And at this camp, this is a place where high schoolers from across the state of Utah would come together to dialogue about our differences. Imagine that in this moment that we're in, dialoguing about our differences and finding deep respect and understanding. I didn't know who Larry was. He was just this cute, short, white guy who walked up to me and put his hand out and said, "Hello, I'm Larry Goldsmith. How are you?" And I talked to him, and he sat down with me for an hour, and he wanted to know everything about what young people are thinking about and what understanding looks like in a dialogue with young people. So we spent an hour together, and then we decided to make a lunch date, which probably a lot of you know this about Larry. I have to also say that was the first time a man ever kissed me on my cheek before. I was like, what's this about? I kind of like it, but it was new to me. And I don't know about all of you, but when Larry gives you a kiss on the cheek, it's just kind of like a little bit of sunshine. So we made these standing dates. And we would go to lunch all around town at least once a month for the next 30 years. And some of his favorite haunts, if you've gone to lunch with Larry, you've probably been to one of these with him, was the Other Place downtown, the Little America Cafe, countless West Side Mexican restaurants, and his favorite one was Chubby's in Rose Park. And if you've never been to Chubby's, maybe you should try it out. And of course, Lamb's Grill, which is no longer around. And when Larry would walk into a restaurant, he would have this unwavering attention to making sure that all the staff felt welcomed and honored. He would talk about their makeup, their earrings, their beautiful tattoos. He was a great tipper. And in those conversations, Larry was always kind of like by script. He wanted to talk about current news, because this man was always reading the news. He wanted to talk about what was going on internationally, nationally, locally. And then he wanted to turn his attention to talking in a positive way about extraordinary leaders in our community. He wanted to talk about who the leaders were of new nonprofits, who was coming into town, who's been around for a long time. And then finally, he wanted to discuss a bolder vision for Utah. Where are we headed? And then at the end of our meal, he always said the same thing, because he never finished his meal. He would say, "I surrender." And then give a cute smile to the server, and then say, "May I have your dessert menu?" Because he always wanted to spend time a little sweet. In a work day, it was a 2-hour affair, which was fine and also made me a little bit nervous. And now I want to paint a second picture, and this is about him around the family table. So there was always a hum of conversation rooted in justice around the Goldsmith table. I can still hear them. In fact, when my wife and I, Melanie, would visit, Sue would waste no time. She would get straight in there and look at you and say, "Okay, what I really want to know is, how is your relationship going?" And it was terrifying, but it was very true. And then with a very clear-eyed way, Sue would give you an honest assessment of who in the community was stumbling or drifting from justice. And it was really refreshing because she just said it how it was. And it made me feel like I never wanted to tell Sue a lie, because I always knew she could smell it before it even left my lips. So don't even start. What a remarkable woman. And like Larry, Sue was devoted to nurturing justice for most of the most vulnerable people of our community. She was a guiding force for Travelers Aid, which then became the Road Home. And if any of you had ever gone to a Road Home Chili affair, which was their fundraiser, the Goldsmiths were royalty when they walked in the door, because they cared so much about our unsheltered populations. And then these were the first two people in their house who planted this radical idea in my head. And they would always say, because they were always worried about when it was getting too cold, are we going to open up the shelter in time to allow there to get people in? And they would say, well, if we can't shelter everyone, then we need to raise taxes. Raise taxes. I'd never heard of such an idea before in my life. But they had born something new in my head, and that was, if we can't take care of our community, we need to give more. So that was a really beautiful thing for us to see. And yet, the picture is not over of this man. It would be remiss of me to not discuss what his family has done, the Goldsmith legacy, let's call it. So one way to understand who Larry Goldsmith was and is to look at the way he and Suzanne set in motion. Their children and grandchildren carry the Goldsmith values into the broken places of the world, feeding people facing homelessness in the Bronx, creating childcare for families without shelter, practicing trauma nursing and street medicine in the Pacific Northwest, changing city policy so housing of worships could offer daytime refuge, walking the desert with migrants through No Mas Muertes, and founding organizations that support Native youth in health and movement building. They have built and led nonprofits, cared for children and families as clinicians, strengthened Jewish and civic institutions, fought for animal justice, and offered healing to people struggling with addiction. This is not a coincidence, people. This is not a coincidence. It's an inheritance. In Jewish tradition, we call it tikkun olam, repairing the world. Larry and Suzanne did not just believe in justice, they raised it. They practiced it. They sent it forward. And any measure of a life must include what it teaches to others to do. And by that measure, Larry's legacy is vast. Now, that's the family part, but then there's this other part of Larry, this like leaders, like where does Larry begin and all these other leaders end? Sometimes I can't distinguish Larry from other Salt Lake City giants we spent a lot of time with. People who also nurtured and shared culture of understanding and compassion. I'm thinking about the Smiths family, and the Dolowitzes, and the Litvaks, and the Jacobsons, and the Sargatakises, and the Archulettas, and the Crawfords, and the Davises, and the Gallavins, and the Jarvises, and the Shapiros, to only name a few legends. And I've left so many out. And yet these families are an extension of every single person in this room, meaning you belong on this list too. So get on this list. You're here. You're on here. You are what Larry is. And Larry learned from them, and he learned from each of you, and in turn carried those lessons into every corner of his community life. Now I'll leave you with yet the final picture from me about Larry, and I call it a Lawrence cocktail. It's a racy joke, a tailored suit, a twinkle, bourbon, justice on rocks, and a dash of flirt. Once you've had a Lawrence teeny, your life is never quite the same.
Thank you, Kilo. I'd love to invite up Josh Goldsmith, the grandson of Larry.
Before I get started, you're going to hear a very common thread that has been brought up in the speeches before me. I'm honored to be the third baseman, but also wish that I could have maybe started this thing off, but that's okay. On behalf of all of the grandkids, we want to thank you for being here today and honor and remember our Grandpa Larry. This is one of the first times in a really long time that every single grandkid is back in Salt Lake City, and it has been incredible to spend so much time with all of them back together this weekend. Growing up, there's one thing about Grandpa that we all remember vividly, especially when we were out in public. It didn't matter where we were. A restaurant, a store, walking down the street, Grandpa would always find someone to compliment. Their jewelry, their tattoos, their clothes, their hair, something he noticed and appreciated. And if we're being honest, it made us a little uncomfortable. We'd shift in our seats, avoid eye contact, and silently hope he wouldn't say anything this time. But he always did. And it didn't matter who the person was, young or old, male or female, their skin color or their religion. If Grandpa saw something good, he believed it was worth saying out loud. Looking back now, we realize how wrong we were to feel uncomfortable. Grandpa had a bumper sticker that he carried from year to year, car to car, that read, "Nobody's born a bigot." He didn't just believe that statement, he lived it. Every interaction, he had reflected that belief. He approached people with openness instead of judgment, curiosity instead of fear, and kindness instead of assumptions. What Grandpa was doing in those moments was something incredibly rare. He was choosing kindness openly, consistently, and without hesitation. He saw people, he really saw them. And he made them feel noticed and valued, sometimes in the smallest and simplest way. That kindness wasn't situational. It didn't depend on who you were, what kind of day he was having, how long his nap had lasted. It was the same kindness he showed us as grandkids, to his children, to his friends, to his community, and to complete strangers he would likely never see again. Grandpa made the world better in quiet, ordinary moments, through a warm smile, a genuine compliment, a flirt, as Kilo so kindly said it, a piece of candy from the candy dish, half of his cookie at dessert, or sharing a couple bites of his meal. It was always through these simple gestures where Grandpa made people feel seen. Today, the world often feels loud, divided, and overwhelming. Kindness can feel rare. People rush past each other, absorbed in their own lives, and too often forget the impact of a small human connection. Grandpa taught us that making the world better doesn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes it's as simple as pausing, noticing, and speaking kindness out loud. One of Grandpa's favorite quotes was, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." Grandpa understood that. And because of that, his impact reaches far beyond what he could ever have known. Every person he lifted up, whether family or stranger, carried that feeling with them. So today, instead of feeling uncomfortable, we say thank you. Thank you, Grandpa, for showing us how to live with compassion. Thank you for reminding us that kindness is never wasted, that seeing others matters, and that the world truly can be made better, one person, one moment, one compliment at a time. We will miss you deeply. And and we promise to carry your legacy forward. Doing what we can to make the world a little kinder, just as you did every single day.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate the smiles and the laughter and the tears. That's what it means for somebody's memory to be a blessing. Best thing you can have in Judaism. Following our service today, as we gather in the social hall, family invites you to share with each other your memories of Larry and especially how he made you feel. On my first day as a rabbi at Congregation Kolami, I was unpacking boxes in my office, and I was told that there was a longtime member who wanted to meet me. In walked Larry, this tiny giant of a man, and we spent the next half hour getting to know each other. And that's how I made one of my first friends here. Throughout my years at the synagogue, I got to know this extraordinary mensch who never complained and was always kind and sweet. A challenging part, maybe the most challenging part of being a rabbi, is that people often see you for your title and forget that the rabbi is a human being too, with feelings, with challenges in his own life, and joys to be shared. But every couple months, Larry would call me on my phone. First couple of times I assumed, like most of the other calls I receive, from people, that it was because he needed something. But soon I realized that this was never why Larry called. He would be calling just to check in on me and see how I was doing. These are actually for me. Last year when my contract got renewed, as some of you might remember, I got a little beaten up over that year. And the day that the synagogue announced that my contract was renewed, I got a phone call from Larry. And he said to me, "I'm so happy you're going to be officiating my funeral one day." I told him I hope that was still far away and long from now. But it was important to Larry to take a minute out of his day to call me and let me know that I was loved and that he saw holiness in me beyond just a title. He would ask me about my wife and my girls, what trips I had taken recently. And he wouldn't talk about himself, but sometimes he would talk about his kids or tell me a story about his wife who I didn't get to meet. When Larry discovered in that first conversation I had with him that our birthdays were 3 days apart, we made it an annual tradition to go out for lunch. The first time he said, "Rabbi, I need to take you to this place that's incredible. It has gourmet burgers. You'll love it." And he took me to Red Robin. And that became a special place for us until it closed because we were the only people who would eat there. That we would find a new place. Our very last time at Red Robin was, we celebrated our half birthdays because COVID had prevented us from celebrating our birthday together. And I told him, my wife is about to go into labor any day now, so I might need to reschedule. And he said to me, "Well, I understand." We had our lunch, and 4 hours later, Jill went into labor, and he was the first person I sent a picture of my daughter to. And he was so happy for me. But as I got to know this dear friend, who I, like everyone else in our community, came to love so deeply, I learned that he was much more than a mensch. He was a man whose life teaches us that greatness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, faithfully, and with deep responsibility. In the Torah, there is a figure whose life I keep returning to as I think about Larry, Jacob, later called Israel. Jacob was not the strongest physically, nor the most dramatic. His life was not easy. He knew loneliness and responsibility from a young age and the burden of caring for others. And yet Jacob becomes the father of a people, not through conquest, but through perseverance, memory, love, and an unwavering sense of duty. Larry's childhood was not simple. He learned early how to be self-reliant, how to sit with solitude, how to observe the world carefully. Even as a boy running through San Francisco with his best friend Richard, and even as a young man who would become valedictorian at Lowell High School, Larry carried himself both with seriousness and wonder, an intellect paired with tenderness. Jacob is described in the Torah as Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim, a thoughtful man who dwells in tents. Larry, too, was a man who dwelled deeply in life. He loved opera from childhood. He loved animals, gardens, where he could talk for hours about orchids. He enjoyed cooking and the beauty of a well-set table, especially arranging flowers each Sunday for family dinner. These were not small acts. In Judaism, we understand that holiness lives in attention. Larry's marriage to Suzanne was the great love story of his life. Like Jacob's love for Rachel, it was a love that endured through hardship. As Suzanne lost her sight, her hearing, and eventually her memory, Larry became everything: husband, caretaker, companion, witness. Each evening, they watched the sunset together, believing themselves the luckiest people in the world. And when Suzanne was dying, Larry did not leave her side. This is chesed at its purest, love that remains when nothing is easy. And Larry lived tikkun olam, not an abstract idea, but as daily practice. In his career, from haberdashery to higher education, from the governor's office to community diplomacy, Larry helped people understand one another. When people wrote to the governor, they received thoughtful, compassionate notes from the governor in return, not realizing that it was actually from Larry. He bridged worlds, Jewish and Latter-day Saint, business and government, past and future. His work helped communities function with dignity and respect. Quiet repair is still repair. As a father and grandfather, Larry understood responsibility deeply. He worked long hours so his children could be educated. He taught them not what to think, but how to choose, do the right thing, and make the right decision. His home was a place of safety, especially for grandchildren who needed stability. And like Jacob, Larry's legacy is not measured in possessions, but in people who feel blessed by having known him. In the final chapters of Genesis, Jacob gathers his children and grandchildren and blesses them. He doesn't speak of himself. He looks forward. That's how Jewish lives are measured, not by what we take, but by what we pass on. The week that Larry died was the same week that we read of Jacob's death in the Torah. And for both of them, they were surrounded by their sons and their one daughter, as well as their grandchildren. Their losses were both profoundly felt, as it takes a rare individual who dies at nearly 95, and yet people feel it was still too soon. Larry's memory was extraordinary. His sense of responsibility unwavering, his kindness unshowy but profound. He lived nearly 95 years without a fuss, without spectacle, and without needing recognition, though he earned it, including being honored by the United Jewish Federation of Utah for a lifetime of service. Larry also made a final act of generosity by donating his body to medical education, continuing his lifelong commitment to helping others even after death. In Judaism, we call this chesed shel emet, a true act of kindness given without expectation of return. May we honor him by choosing responsibility over ease, kindness over indifference, and devotion over comfort. Just as Jacob's memory and legacy has inspired our people for thousands of years, may Larry's memory be an inspiration and a blessing for us as well. Zichrono livracha. May his memory be for a blessing. Now, in our tradition, we don't always talk about or know so much what happens after we die. We don't have a way of knowing for sure, and Judaism doesn't like to speculate always about things we don't know, but we know that whatever it is that awaits us is a world without some of the challenges that Larry faced of a fall or decline in health, or losing your spouse, or loneliness you experienced as a child. It's a world where we can be at peace. And we have a prayer called the El Malei Rachamim, which means God of compassion and mercy, in which we ask God with compassion and mercy to escort Larry's soul from this world of challenges to that world where he can be at peace. I'd like to invite our Cantor Emeritus, Cantor Laurie Loeb, one of Larry's friends, to lead us in the Hebrew of El Malei Rachamim. I'll invite you to rise in body or in spirit.
Just a word before I recite this text. I only knew Larry for a little over 50 years, and his family during that time. And one of the things that always struck me about Larry, we came from a very different stream of Judaism, his being an old guard movement and the Reform movement, which stressed ethical culture and ethical behavior. I remember discussing that with Esther Landa, Alech Shalom, and with him at one point. Every Yom Kippur on Kol Nidre, he would be out there. He'd always come over to me and say, and thank me for helping him feel that connection to something beyond himself and beyond us. And for that, I recall his smiling face and his kindness. And may his memory be a blessing for all of us. El Malei Rachamim שוכן במרומים, המצי מנוחה נכונה על כנפי נשארים במעלות, קדושים וטהורים כזועקי המסעירים את נשמת לורנס בן לורנס וגרטרוד שלח לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירט ובשאת כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרוע בצרוע החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, מלניח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Larry Goldsmith, who has gone into his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in the eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal, and may he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated. Scanter. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. And life is a journey from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made this journey stage by stage. A sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. This time, we will turn our thoughts to the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. And with the Mourner's Kaddish, it doesn't talk about mourning or death or loss, but of God's greatness. Because even in a moment of loss or pain, we remember that we feel that loss and pain because God gave us a wonderful gift in Larry's life. And that life continues to be a part of us. There's a poem, in the rising of the sun and its going down. We will remember Larry. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember him. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember him. For so long as we live, Larry too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. I'd like to invite you once again to rise in body or in spirit for the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yikadah v'yikadash shemei rabah, ve'alman divrach hirte v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon u'v'yamechon u'v'chayei dehol beit Yisrael, ba'agalah u'v'zman kari v'imru. Yehei shmei rabah mevarach le'olam ome'el maya, yibarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudashah, rihu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tishba'ata v'ne'emata dami ram be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yesh lama rabba min shemaya, v'haim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. O say shalom b'mromav, Huya say shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. You may be seated. I would once again like to invite Carl Johansson share with us a concluding song. Now, as we conclude, let me say these words to Larry's family. Hamakom Yenechem Etchem Betoshar Avelet Sion V'Yerushalayim. I'd like to ask you to repeat after me. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. Now, as we conclude our service, I'll invite you to go forth in the pursuit of peace, in the celebration of life, and with Larry's memory being both a source of inspiration and a blessing to all of you. Thank you. This concludes our service.